Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for an important fireside chat with a friend and a contributor to the Soufan Center, Patrick Skinner, who is a former CIA officer turned local police officer in Savannah, Georgia. My name is Amarita Torres, and I'm the Director of Policy Research and Programs at the Soufan Center. We are a nonpartisan strategy center dedicated to increasing awareness of global security issues, both in the United States and around the world. As you all have seen, over the past several weeks, we have been following closely the events that have occurred since the murder of George Floyd, an unarmed Black man by a police officer in Minneapolis, which has put a spotlight on the ongoing challenges that persist in the United States with respect to police brutality, police community relations, and race relations. The ongoing protests, both in the United States and around the world, serve as a reminder that there is an underbelly of anger and frustration around these issues and a demand for change. We thought, what better guest to have with us today than Patrick to discuss his views on the state of policing and the changes we should be thinking about. Patrick, as I mentioned, is a contributor to the Soufan Center's work, and he's a local police officer in Savannah. He has a really unique set of experiences to bear to the conversation. He's a former CIA officer. He was previously a federal air marshal, a U.S. Capitol Police officer, and served in the U.S. Coast Guard. Patrick has also been featured in the Washington Post, the New Yorker, Vox, The Independent, and National Public Radio to share his insights. If you know, and if you follow Patrick on Twitter, you must already know that he's been quite outspoken on these issues, denouncing the use of excessive force by police officers, and he has been calling for some time now for a different approach to policing. I will note that this discussion and Patrick's views are his own, and they do not represent those of his police department or of the police department that he serves. I also want to mention that there is sensitivities around this conversation. We've been viewing the discussion, we've been participating in the discussion, so I ask you all just to come to this conversation with an open mind as we discuss these issues. And just a few housekeeping issues before we get started. We will be taking your questions via the Q&A box in the Zoom console. You'll see that in the middle of your console there. And so please think about your questions throughout. Please use that console to share your questions throughout the webinar. We'll take them during the Q&A part of the discussion. And please note that this conversation is on the record. So with that, and then actually one more thing, we are going to be live streaming this on Facebook, and so I'll let you know when that starts, and you can share the link to friends, to colleagues who want to participate. So with that, we're going to kick off the discussion. Hi, Pat. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. So I'll get started with the first question. In the Washington Post, you recently published an op-ed. And in that piece, it was a great piece, there was a point you made that stuck with a lot of people, including me, that illustrates the connections you make to policing in your local community. You say, refusing to fight this war on crime has become the fight of my life, because my neighbors are not just the point of being a local cop. They are how I can be a local cop. It is their consent that enables me, their trust that empowers me, their truth that drives me, that we all matter or none of us do. This has been picked up a lot, and I want to ask you if you can explain why that seems to resonate so much with people both throughout the country and all over the world.
I think because it's just like common sense and decency, which we're not really seeing with police right now, and for a long time, I think. Again, I'm nothing special. I'm lucky enough to have a platform in certain times. I can pick and choose what I want to do when I want to speak out. So I understand that's really lucky. But it's just something that I from day one of being a local cop, I understood quickly that it wasn't just, I wasn't working for these people. I had to be working with them. And again and again, I'm an English major and I love language, but this isn't semantics. This is literally, and hopefully people will start to understand it because I keep repeating it. They're not the point of they are the point of the job, yes, but they are how I can do the job. Without them, one, I would have, be kind of lonesome, but it is their consent. I mean, that's the whole point of this. The London police law to repeal, I mean, it's based on that. I didn't know about that until like a week ago. So I was reinventing history, but no, but it was very obvious that if you connected with people and you just with your neighbors, and sometimes it should be literally, they are my neighbors, and at least in the same city, or at least in the same precinct, that if it's collaborative justice. I mean, there are a lot of terms like transparent justice, collaborative justice, procedural justice, where you can see the steps. And I'm hearing about them after the fact, but I was discovering that them ad hoc every day by interacting with my neighbors. And from day one, I just refused to be afraid. And so this fear that drives drives most stuff, and this urge to be seen as dominating, it was the opposite of what I was seeing. And I'm a little tiny person, so I'm not going to dominate anybody. And so it's such a fundamental thing. It drives everything. I work for them, but also I can't do my job without them. If they don't want me to do the job, they can stop me.
Yeah. No, I'm picking up on this for versus with, and you mentioned, this collaborative justice piece, which we'll get to through the questions, but it's a really great point. I want to talk a little bit about your previous experience. You spent years working counterterrorism operations with the CIA in some of the most difficult places around the world, facing insurgencies, Afghanistan, Iraq. You were also responsible for building relationships with some dangerous people inside of terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda. And then you decided to come back home to Savannah and become a local cop in your hometown. So that's a big leap for most people. And so what drove you to make the choice to leave the CIA and then the choice to become a police officer?
Well, I mean, I loved every second of the CIA. Some articles have said I've left disgruntled. I didn't leave disgruntled about the CIA. I left disgruntled about what we were trying to do overseas, like the United States. First in Afghanistan, but then really in Iraq the last year, 2009 to 2010, it was terrible. I mean, we could just see it. And I could see that was when I was, face to face with what we were calling winning the hearts and minds. And I knew we were not winning the hearts and minds. But at the same time, I was having intense personal relationships with sources, professional relationships, but they're very intense, because to get someone to do something, we don't use leverage, blackmail. We use whatever the real motivation is. Could be money. If that's money, that's great. We got money. Sometimes it's revenge. But most of the time it was they wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. And, I'm not talking about psychopathic ISIS or Al-Qaeda and Iraq people. These were the people on the periphery. Those are the ones we were trying to target so they could tell us where Zarqawi was, stuff like that. And you started realizing that just everybody is the same at a certain level. And they have wants and needs and motivations, and also just a basic need for dignity. And I was seeing that. So I would treat these people as friends. And was it superficial? Yes. Was it effective? Yes. And then at the same time, every single thing we did outside of that meeting room destroyed that relationship, and then destroyed the community, and then literally destroyed the nation, and then destroyed our image. And so I saw it very, very, very clearly then. And then I came back here because my dad was dying of Alzheimer's. I didn't quit because I was, disillusioned. I was burned out. I will say that. That was a tough year. But, my dad was dying of Alzheimer's. We're from Savannah, so I moved back here to take care of him. I very, very lucky to get introduced to Ollie through a friend of ours, Brian, who just passed away. And that started 5 or 6 year period where Ollie introduced me to another level of I'd never obviously been on media. I didn't know anything about that. And then consulting at a higher level. And so that I got to see, I traveled a lot, got to see a lot of stuff and talk to people. At the same time, I was living here and getting to see that my neighborhood was kind of in stasis, would be the best way to put it. We have pretty good relationships here, but it's still, between neighbors and police, but it's still tense, even here. And so I saw that, and I just started feeling like a fraud, telling people what to do in Syria, where I hadn't been there in a long, long time. But I couldn't tell you what was happening 4 blocks from my house. And so after another friend was killed in Afghanistan, where we had just been 13 years before, I decided we don't have any kids, so I can afford to be stupid. And I just wanted to make a change. And so I did.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean, it's inspiring. And you mentioned winning hearts and minds. And I think, that's, as a former diplomat, we hear that a lot, winning hearts and minds, winning the narrative at a global level. And I think you touch upon this idea of winning hearts and minds at the local level. How do we win hearts and minds in the work that we do? So that's fascinating. I did want to talk a little bit about going back to your previous experience and what you've done before. The New Yorker did a great profile piece on you in 2018 as you first began your work as a local cop. And one thought that you shared in that piece, and I want to quote it because I think it's telling, we have to stop treating people like we're in Fallujah. It doesn't work. Just look what happened in Fallujah. So that piece was written 2 years ago, but it feels like it can very much be applied to the discourse today, whether we're talking the military or policing. So how has your perception changed or developed over time since that piece?
I'm ever convinced, I'm more convinced that I'm correct. And not that I'm right, because there's a lot of different ways to do the job. I know that there are several ways that we must not do the job. But the whole rhetoric, the militarization of police has continued unabated. The rhetoric of us versus them has really skyrocketed. Police have the tendency, and I'll use in the collective term, we hate when people stereotype us or generalize us or prejudice against cops, but we as a profession do that to every single body else. And then the defensiveness, which I'm seeing by fellow cops, is just really disheartening. And so I saw police officers, or actually then military, standing on corners trying to win hearts and minds. You couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. And then here I see us having meetings every once a month with, community leaders and stuff like that, which I don't understand what that means. Those people in that room are not your target audience. Those people are already bought in, and they don't have as much influence as we think. We just like to work with them. It's everything I saw over there, we do over here, except we don't have any money back here. It doesn't make any sense.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, going to, I want to turn the conversation a little bit. You mentioned this us versus them mentality, and I want to bring us to the ideas that have been going back and forth on police reform. There's been a lot of discussion on reducing police budgets as a response to police brutality. There's a movement that is starting on this defund the police, with the idea that police funding should be shifted to other government services and social support programs. And advocates of this approach have highlighted the systemic challenges facing police departments. For example, the role of police unions, which I know you've spoken about, the lack of accountability and transparency around police actions. And then there are discussions taking place around the broader police reform that might be necessary in changing what it means to actually police in America, and the need for more training and more investment. And so, many also say that defunding the police will cut the exact training and accountability programs that require investments to improve law enforcement. So Pat, what do you think about all this?
I think there's a lot of levels to that. Like, the first thing I'm struck at is how rare it is to anyone ever talk about police budgets. It's always like the military. It's always an automatic. It has to go up at all times. There's no accountability for what you did with that money. In fact, when your metrics, however you define them, are bad, you just say you need more money so you can do more of the same, which, that leads to what we're having. Now, I'm not saying police departments or local departments are poor. They are for the most part. NYPD is very different. LAPD, they're very different. But most local departments are poor. I get that. But everyone else is too. And so the discussions about, defunding the police, I mean, politically, it's a bad, slogan. It's a bad idea. But in a democracy, it's an honest question. We work for these people, my neighbors. If the neighbors decide they want something different, then they can do something different. I'm not going to get defensive about it. But yeah, there are a lot you can do, but I don't think it costs money to change, at least because I have a very narrow experience. I don't, I'm an anecdote machine, not statistics. I don't have data. I only know what I've done for the last 3 years on thousands of 911 calls, and then trying to live it every single day. But the police reform I'm thinking about starts with changing the mindset. And you don't need any money for that. You literally just need to stop saying you're in a war. You need to imagine the end of a war, this war on crime. Mm-hmm. And that, if you start that, it won't fix everything, of course not, but it will certainly change the dynamic. And then the training that follows from that wouldn't make any sense if you're trying to do a warrior ethos. We literally have classes called, the warrior mind and the warrior cop. And sometimes it's designed to, like, I remember this, there was a mentality a training where it was called the warrior mindset. It was designed that when you're in a life or death physical struggle, not to give up and die. which is really good. I don't want to do that. And so it taught you to like just be fierce and a warrior, to fight literally for your life. But somehow that one class of 45 minutes turned into, this is what policing should be. And so when I go up to this domestic call, I'm also in various stages. Every single thing is a various stages, a fight for my life. And you know, I could be killed by anybody at all time, but they will try to kill me at all time. And so if you just start with there are a lot, you know, tactics need to change, everything needs to change, equipment, that needs to change. But at the beginning, it doesn't cost any money just to say, we're not fighting this war anymore. And then everyone else, and then sorry to interrupt, but everyone else needs money. And so, I mean, libraries need money. It's the one place in America where people can go and they don't get hassled to spend money. I see them, it's air conditioning. It's really bad down here about air conditioning. And struggling homeless neighbors, you know, they can hang out there, and they should, we want them to. And it's a place to learn, parks, all this stuff. And so the more that you spend on that, you still need police. I'm not saying that. I'm a detective now, and I know what violent crime is. But most of the stuff we deal with is not that. And everything is made worse by the lack of investments earlier. By the time that phone rings on 911, a lot has gone wrong. And a lot of opportunities have been missed. Now, granted, there are monsters. I have met monsters in my life, but they're very, very few. And I don't work against them. I work for everybody else.
It's a really important point. I want to remind everyone that the Q&A function is there. So if you have questions, please start adding your questions to the Q&A. You touched on a really important point that's part of my next question, Pat. Many people believe that the United States has a deeply flawed police system. Police have the power to use force on communities to protect us. But as you mentioned, you know, police are also engaging us at our most crisis-ridden moments. And I'll mention a couple: substance abuse, domestic violence, mental illness. And police have been seen, you know, to abuse their power at times. And this has very lethal consequences. It's complex, it's scary, it's complicated, and then there are parallels to the role of the military. The military has been in the middle of convening conversations with warring parties. They've had to help civilians get access to humanitarian aid in war-torn countries. But these roles seem pretty far afield from also being people who have the power to shoot and kill those who they deem as a threat. And so both police and the military don't seem quite qualified or trained to do this sort of work. And Pat, you've been quoted to say, and you mentioned this before, that it often falls to the police to handle what you call the social work of last resort. And you've said that at times you feel as if the role of a police officer is to pick up the pieces of something that has broken in every single possible way. So do you think policing and social supports are distinct? Do you think that they're linked? And how do you think about the responsibilities expected of police officers? How do they impact the way we should be approaching police reform?
Yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of police officers, rightfully so, say, hey, we're asked to do a lot of things we're not trained to do. And that is true, because we are trained to drive fast, put handcuffs on, shoot, de-escalate. That was like a couple-hour class. I remember that. But most of the stuff we deal with is not crime. It is, I call it near crime. It's trending towards crime. If you don't show up, it might be a crime. Somebody might get, you know, stabbed or whatever. But before that, there's a lot of time to, you know, slow down. I always tell cops to slow down. And also, it's a police matter because for one simple reason, they called the police. That's it. We don't have the option of saying, there's nothing I can do. This isn't a police matter. It's a police matter because they call. Social work is very distinct. And a lot of people, rightfully so, in social work want the cops there if it looks like there's going to be danger. Because something, you know, child custody with child services and stuff, that stuff gets angry and violent sometimes. But they also want to maintain the independence, because the police are seen as, you know, the punishers or whatever it is. I mean, we also enforce laws. And so a lot of these people have, you know, issues with probation violations, substance abuse, whatever. And so social services don't want us involved that much, because then we would have to step in as a cop and do something, and people wouldn't come. That's why, you know, like the police don't want to ask, well, most that I know of, don't want to talk about immigration status, because we don't care about that. We want them to call 911. If you start running immigration status on people that call 911, they're going to stop calling 911 and they're going to get hurt. And that's not the point. And so there are a lot of things where training would help, yes. But also, I think that we would also just understand, if we get better at knowing that we're not alone in this. We always feel alone on these calls. But there are a lot of options. There are decades-long, generations-long groups that are doing this work in each community. The better we plug in with that, know their phone numbers, say, hey, I understand you're having this problem. Let me put you in touch with this. The better we get at that, the better we understand that everyone's not trying to kill us. Yes, people are trying to kill you sometimes, but not everybody. We can then start bringing in social services. We can refer them to that. There are a lot of options, and I think that when I'm at X and X marks the spot of some drama and I'm all alone except for a couple other cops, you feel like you are alone. Like, I don't know how am I supposed to solve poverty? How am I supposed to solve this person who is clearly sick with some kind of, persistent illness or mental illness or substance abuse? How do I fix that? And the answer is you don't. You try to mitigate it and then get them help. And so it's easy for cops to get overwhelmed. I found myself doing it real fast, I'll tell you. We'd go to the same kind of calls. Sometimes it'd be the same house, but you go to the same calls. And even in my I'm still a rookie cop, you'd start to get frustrated, like, damn it, another domestic violence call. I thought we ended domestic violence yesterday because you handled that call yesterday. And I started to get frustrated, and I realized I started laughing because it's stupid. Firefighters don't do that. They don't say, damn it, another fire. We ended fire yesterday. We put that fire out. We solved fire. It's over with. But how can it happen again? And so we need to understand that each call in a societal way doesn't exist in isolation, but for a cop, it might as well. You handle that call. You make the person who called 911 feel better for calling. Don't get mad that these problems keep happening. These people are devastated with bad luck, bad judgment, bad health, bad circumstances, bad parents. I mean, everything's stacked against a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so the more you realize that, the less frustrated you get. And they also understand that you're not solving anything. I mean, you're just trying to make it not worse.
Yeah, no, point taken, especially on de-escalation and mitigation, really. Yeah. So relatedly, you talked earlier about this idea of a mindset, that the mindset needs to change within police, and that the war, assuming the war on crime, needs to end. And you've said before, sometimes cops talk about people in the community as civilians, but you disagree with that. You've said we're not the military, the people we're policing are our neighbors. So can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by the neighbor mindset? Yeah,
I mean, at first it was just something because I categorically reject calling people civilians because I'm a civilian. I mean, I was in the military, I guess. I was in the Coast Guard. But a police officer in the academy, they have military rank, it's military structure, and we're taught us versus them. And then the language is, hey, a civilian, you're going out there. Sometimes they say citizen, which is nicer, but civilian. And I was like, no, that means you're standing here, and then it becomes us versus them. And language is important because what you say is what you think, and then what you think is what you do. And so I made a conscious effort. I said, it's going to sound weird and it's going to sound really repetitive, but I'm going to say the word neighbor every time. I'm not going to say the person. I'm going to say the neighbor. I'm not going to ever say civilian. And then I just started doing it. I started doing it in my reports, like actual police reports, and then doing it on the radio, and then doing it. I became a training officer and just doing it again and again. And I would tell people, look, it's not a metaphor. Because like the war on crime is not a metaphor. At first it was like some kind of, cute saying, but it has become a war on crime, a war on a thing. And it's just like the war on terror. It was incredibly destructive, and it's still ongoing. But it became a war in our neighborhoods. And so I was like, well, if you just change this, because I don't have any money, I'm not going to change, all this equipment stuff, but I can change what you say. And I can demonstrate it by saying, hey, these are my neighbors. Literally, these are my neighbors. I live down the street from my precinct. And so I always say grand gestures are for, I'll be polite, jerks. They're for frauds. At some point we need to make massive change, but how about just start calling people neighbors? Because if you do it enough, you'll change your mindset. And if you change your mindset, it'll be much harder to choke out or abuse your neighbor. And it's just simple things like that. Like you'll understand there's dignity. You'll slow down a little bit before you start barking orders because you're like, that's my neighbor. Like, even if you don't know that guy or a woman, they're your neighbors. And so I've been very, very, very intentional about it. And at least for me. And then also, I'm not as angry. I don't want to be frustrated. And angry cops make horrible cops. And for some reason, policing is the one profession where we say it's forgivable for them to be murderously angry. You know, he had a bad day, so he choked that guy out, or he had a bad, or he was scared. We would never, ever, ever, ever say that for any other profession, like pilots or surgeons. And so I just said, look, start changing at least little things, the mindset, which is basically everything.
No, it's great. And it sounds like you're really, I mean, you've gone from thinking about this mindset to really institutionalizing it in your police department, you know, writing it in your reports, training other police officers on it. So it sounds like you really are institutionalizing it.
Yeah, but what happened was, so I saw what we were trying to do overseas, like where we would literally write, smarter people would write white papers and stuff like, get the Sunni community on your side, or the leader of this community, which I never understood what that meant. And so if you tried it over here, it would just be bizarre, like get the leader of the white community. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So why? And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to do here what we kept running our mouth about doing overseas. Here I speak the language, actually. I have home field advantage. I don't have to rotate in and out every 60 days or whatever. I live here. And so I thought, how could you change it? And then I still realized it is so difficult. You have to do it every single time, every day, because these connections, they're so slow to build and so easy to burn. And, but I was trying to like demonstrate to myself that what we were trying overseas was impossible. And so we need to redefine what it means to be a police officer.
Yeah.
Something small like that, sorry.
No, it's great. I'm going to run through 2 quick questions and then we're going to open it up. So you take a certain humbleness and a learning standpoint with your work, Pat. You talk a lot about learning from neighbors and colleagues in your day-to-day work. So I'm interested to know, what lessons have you learned from both community residents and fellow cops that both more people should know about, but also lessons that you believe to be inaccurate or abandoned entirely?
Yeah, there's been a couple things. I mean, the agency always taught you to be very, very aware of all the stuff you didn't know. And so, you know, and I'm a short, bald guy. I should be humble. And so, but this job is humbling because it's just like the CIA, except for instead of having a meeting every couple of days, I have 10, 15, 20 911 calls a day. Well, now that I'm in the detective offices, I have cases, you know, and you realize you don't know anything. And so I understood quickly when I step out on a 911 call and I'm supposed to be the authority, I don't know what's going on. And I mean, that's not being humble. I don't know what's going on. In fact, sometimes the information I got on dispatch is the opposite of what, so I have anti-knowledge. And that anti-knowledge has made me angry or fearful because it's, you know, they're shooting, and it's not. And so I've learned that a couple things, that most people are decent. Some people said I'm going to be jaded when I became a cop, that I would only see the worst in people. And that, the exact opposite has happened. I was never a good person, but I'm a much better person now because I just realized most people are decent. Most people are good. Even somebody who shoplifts, they're not a monster. Now, violent crimes, I have a special focus on domestic crime, people that abuse their loved ones. So I focus on violent crimes, but most of the stuff we deal with is not that. And so I understood that most people are decent. And that is it's kind of, it washes over me all the time. I make connections with people that I drink a lot of coffee. And so I go into these stores, I talk to people, I refuse to get free coffee. I can't stand it. But so I do that. And so I've learned that most people are decent. And then I've learned that that it's incredibly expensive and to be poor. I mean, I didn't make that up. I don't know if Baldwin or someone said that, but it's very difficult to be poor here, but it's expensive. Everything costs more because you don't have low interest loans and stuff like that. And that being poor, you're almost in violation of laws automatically because you're going to run out of registration and I mean all these things that cost money, or that you're going to live in a neighborhood that is over policed. And I mean that is, you drive down the block, if you don't have a tail light on, you're going to get pulled over. And so we think that's where the crime is because that's where we're setting up. And so I just learned that most people, I guess most people are decent. I believe most people wish me well if I wish them well. And then together we can kind of identify the actual monsters. Yeah.
I'll close with one final question before we open it up to the group. We have over 15 questions, which is great. So, Pat, you've become quite a celebrity on Twitter. You've been profiled in the New Yorker. You've been lauded as someone that really understands the problems plaguing our country at a very local level. And you've also been known to tweet about your cat. You have a cat, Mean Cat, really funny to follow. But in all seriousness, you bring a certain levity and an energy to your role as a police officer. I've seen on your social media handles and in your writing that you do these acts, like you provide goodie bags for the community, you engage with community residents as you've spoken about in ways that we don't usually see from police officers. So interested to know, how does this contribute to building communities of trust?
I think that they're shaping me. I don't think that the role of being a police officer is shaping me a little bit, but more the time I'm spending with my neighbors shapes it. Mm-hmm. And I realize that we're not getting out of the cars enough. We patrol. I mean, in fact, the term patrol is a military term. We drive through, enemy territory. And so I kept my windows down. I do all that stuff. But then I realized I need to get out of the car. And sometimes it's awkward just to talk to people and stand there and go, hey, hello, how are you? And, they're not good because, they're hungry, whatever it is. And so it's like going to a party and bringing something like a cake or something, it gives you something to, hey, I can now talk to somebody. It gives me a reason. And so I came up with these tactical carrying kits, and boy, they've really gotten bigger now. We had to get 2.5 gallon bags. And I did that to help them. I did, they need help, but that wasn't the point. It's called tactical carrying because one, I thought more cops would want to do it if I used the word tactic. I literally thought that. It sounds tough, but also it was a tactic for us to get out of the car and talk to people. It forces you to get out, and you're not just going to toss food like you're feeding someone at a zoo. You come up and you explain, hey, buddy, this is this, and it's a time where you're talking to somebody, and you're not running them for search warrants. You're not, asking them, and so it just gave you a chance to start engaging with them, and then do it again the next day. And it teaches you, one, not to be resentful. Like, hey, I just gave that guy $5 yesterday, and it didn't solve anything. He ate yesterday. Why the hell is he hungry today? I don't get that. And then you start realizing these problems are really systematic, and that's one person under one overpass. Okay, now look across the street and there's another person on an overpass. And then you're like, the scale is enormous. And then you just do one good deed at a time. I'll tell you something real fast. So I do training every now and then about this, rapport-based elicitation, how to talk to people as neighbors. And so I always begin this, and these are police officers. And I always begin it with one question. I say, when was the last time everyone in the audience had an encounter with a police officer where they weren't telling you to do something or you weren't asking them for something and they didn't know you were a cop? And I mean, out of hundreds of people, I've had 3 people say, oh yeah, one time a cop came up and said he liked my jersey, like it was a Dallas Cowboys jersey or something. And I said, that's a problem. We are the most pro-cop friendly, people on the planet because we're actually cops. And even we don't have positive, voluntary, spontaneous interactions with police. There's something fundamentally broken about that. And so I said, look, your assignment is to go out and increase the times that your neighbors interact with the police where they're not scrutinized or under suspicion. And so it's okay not to run everybody every single time. It's okay not to grab their name and date of birth when you're talking to them. Maybe take a couple, and that slows you down, but also shows you the power of interpersonal relationships. And the fact that we are so isolated, and it's self-isolation. I did this in the CIA. I only hung out with other CIA officers, overseas, because, I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. And here, I've got my name on my badge and all that stuff. And we need to just get out. And because we're the ones making it us versus them. We are, and so it drives me crazy when you hear people talk about how persecuted the cops are. And I say, yes, a white cop in the American South is so persecuted. Just if you say that, you almost want to laugh at how stupid that is. It's just like, no, we're not. We're the ones doing that. And so I try to tell everybody, go out and talk to people. Handle the crime. Crime is easy. You see it, handle it. But most stuff is not crime. So go out and just engage. And those bags and stuff. And then Mean Cat, no one believes me. He is, I wish I could go get him. He's in the house. But he's terrible.
Well, no, I think it's really important. Thanks, Pat. And ending on that point on the engagement, on engaging with neighbors beyond just, trying to figure out a crime or looking for or having a suspicion is incredibly important. I'm going to jump into questions now. We have 16 now. So I'm going to start with Rami Khoury, who's joining us from Beirut, Lebanon, and with his question. Do you see a link between the mostly failed militarism of the United States abroad and the increasing militarized nature of the domestic police in the United States?
Yeah, I think it's all one and the same. I mean, there's that 1033 program where we got the police, local police get, old military equipment. And, SWAT teams do need equipment. I'm not saying that a police department doesn't need to have a MRAP or a Bearcat or an armored vehicle. I'm not saying that, but they probably don't want to dress as soldiers with tactical vests and sunglasses and stand on corners. You really don't want to do that. How about, so yeah, I mean, the tactics that we used overseas where we said, we're going to win hearts and minds with this machine gun and deal with people. And the only people we're going to deal with are the people that will deal with us. They speak overseas. It was so obvious. If they spoke English, we worked with them. It didn't matter. And they took our money, we worked with them. And here we work with the people that kind of agree with us because we're very defensive. We don't like to be told we stink. And so everything overseas, what we're trying to do overseas, we're doing here. And we're failing again, except we don't have any excuses here. I mean, there at least you could say you don't know anything about the culture. You're an occupying army because you actually are. Well, here we're doing the same thing, but just in every American city almost.
Yeah, yeah. Another question coming from Zachary Schwitzky. Amazon and IBM have recently announced that police will no longer be able to use their facial recognition technology. Do you feel like this all or nothing position is too extreme? And generally, do you think governments and authorities can utilize advancing technology without abusing it?
Yeah, I mean, so I don't have access to it. I read about that yesterday, and I was like, oh, interesting. I know that facial recognition software is beset with the same prejudices that every single thing else is. It has terrible misidentification, right, for women, minorities. So there are the same issues that everywhere else are going to be in AI and facial recognition. And so you probably want to be more thoughtful about it. I've never seen the stuff. As a police officer, I love having some databases. It's really helpful to be able to find somebody through a phone. I mean, it's really, I like that. But I'm also very aware that maybe sometimes we shouldn't have that information. Like, backdoor encryption for iPhones. No, I mean, and so I understand there's an all or nothing, and so Amazon said no. That's at a level that I can't really speak to. I don't understand. That's a way policy level. But as a person, yeah, I don't want the government to be able to unlock every phone. You know what? If they're like, well, we need to have this information for a ticking time bomb. Well, I saw that. One, there is never a scenario like that. That's a TV show called 24. Then maybe you have to get it in another way. Or maybe, God forbid, oh my God, we just don't have that information. How about that? I mean, we'd have to live with that.
Yeah, yeah. Another question from Irfan Saeed. Police training seems to focus on the most lethal way of handling an issue or an arrest. How do you balance officer safety with the need for a less lethal or aggressive way of handling an arrest or a police interaction?
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, so police training focuses on shooting, driving, and a couple other things, because those are high liability, high risk things. That's the stuff that's going to cost a lot of money and that are fatal if done wrong or right with shooting. And so they focus on that. De-escalation, and granted, now if you're dealing with somebody who's intoxicated, in a psychotic break, or drugs, you're not going to de-escalate that. You're not. You're going to, and it's going to be very obvious. You're going to walk up and you're going to see it, and you're going to have to grab them. But there's still many ways. And so, and there are officer safety, and that's always like the trump card. Police always say, what about officer safety? And I go, yes, but I'm actually safer by de-escalating everything long before we get there, every single day. So I'm not constantly on alert thinking someone's going to kill me. I can actually focus on the times where people actually want to kill me. And I'm a cop. I don't want to die. I don't want to get shot. But I'm not going to mishandle 99.9% of the calls because of that 0.1% of something might happen. I'm not going to do that. I'm just not. And I believe that we're safer the closer we get to people. And, that's so easily misread. They're like, oh, you want to stand next to, a murderer? No, but most people aren't murderers. I hate that we always have to go to the extreme. Like, oh, you don't want to shoot people. No. I mean, yeah, no, of course you don't want to shoot people. And so, yeah, we should spend more time. I always say the cops need to get more comfortable being uncomfortable. People yelling at you. I will let somebody insult me. I don't care. They can call me all they want. Now, I will not allow them to do that to other people, neighbors, in a crowd or something like that. They're not going to threaten somebody else. I don't want them to threaten me. We'll deal with that later. But for like insults and stuff like that, you can. And I tell people, I lean over and say, hey, man, I'm going to let you vent. And I'm going to let you, act like you're winning or whatever. And I'll tell them flat out in a soft voice. And I'll say, but if you do this or this, we're going to punk you in front of your family. All right. And we don't want to do that. So maybe, we'll let you have the last word. Just walk away. But you can yell at me while you're doing it, but you're not going to threaten someone else. And they'll do it. They'll go, blah, 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 blah. The more you get comfortable with that, because I'm not worried about my authority. I'm not worried about being thought of as a sucker. I want them to think I'm nice because I try to be, and then the criminals we can arrest them. It's no big deal. Yeah. But shooting, I mean, there's always a police, especially in America, because there's so many damn guns. I mean, I go on call, everybody has guns. And that's an issue, but we need to spend more time on everything up to that gun.
Yeah. We've gotten a couple of questions related to the global war on terror and 9/11. So I'm going to try and pull these together. So one question, my sense is the impact, this comes from Munir Ibrahim, my sense is the impact of 9/11 on the country's psyche and mind state is still with us. And then there's also the question around how the global war on terror following 9/11 has had a role on the militarization of the police force. So, both this idea of a mindset. And so why is there a pushback? And that comes from Chris Velios, that second question. Why is there such a pushback to move away from that mindset? And is equipment like MRAPs really necessary, or does that increase the divide between police and the people that they're hired to protect?
Yeah, I'll answer the last one first, sorry, because I remember it. So, like an MRAP, I mean, most departments probably need one. Keep it in the garage, and then you'll know when you need it because it'll be that time where someone's shooting up a mall with a high-powered rifle. Yeah, you probably want that. But it's, I don't think most police departments use those. It's nice to have, but I also understand that if you have it, you'll start to think of ways to use it. But the war on terror is our war on crime. It's structured exactly the same. The language is exactly the same. It's us versus them, and we keep broadening what it means to be them. And so the police have turned to, our war on terror is war on crime, and it's us, the police, versus everybody. And so that's the war on terror. And also it's a war on an abstract thing. It's like war against humidity. You're not going to change it. And so there's a reluctance because it's such a winning argument. It's like officer safety. Oh, you want us to be kind? You want us to be gentle on criminals? Well, one, yeah, I think you should because they're in your custody. But two, real toughness is not treating everybody like crap because of the actions of one person, which is exactly what we did with the war on terror and what we still do every day. We treat entire communities, we hold them to blame. We say, if they were really on our side, they would tell us who the terrorists are. Like how the hell are they supposed to know who the terrorists are? But then you come over here and it's the exact same thing. If these people in this community really supported law and order, they would tell us who the criminals were. Like one, they would know. Two, we can't, the criminals live there. I mean, they live there. We're tourists in these places, they shouldn't trust us in protection because they live there. And so it's the exact same. It's collective punishment. But it's a winning argument because then all you can say is if there's ever any criticism, you say, oh, you're soft on terror, or you want another 9/11, or you want another cop killed. No, I lost my sergeant last year. He was murdered. Nothing good from that. There's no lesson to learn from that. He was murdered and it was awful and his family's they're destroyed. And that happens to a lot of police officers. It also happens to a lot of Americans a lot. And so I always just say it's a winning argument for people that don't want to change anything. I just say, in fact, we just need more money to continue to do it. And I tell people, stop holding yourself to the standard of the criminal. And that's exactly what we did in the war on terror. They're like, well, why do you torture people? Because they'll cut our head off. So we should, you think that if you're captured by Osama bin Laden, he would, do the Geneva Convention of Rights? No, but why are you holding yourself as a counter-terrorist specialist to the level of a terrorist? And then now I'm a police officer. Why am I holding myself to the level of a criminal? You think the criminal is going to do that? No, but he's a criminal. I'm not. I'm a law enforcement officer, peace officer. And so, yeah, people don't want to change because, one, they might have a vested interest, but also it's a mindset. And nobody wants to imagine the war ending.
Yeah. This question comes from Colin Clark. What can local police forces do to more effectively recruit people from the communities they serve so that the police more accurately reflect the demographics of the neighborhoods they operate in?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the problem. I mean, the CIA struggled with diversity hiring because, the 60s and 70s, the government's pretty racist, and forever before that. And departments suffer that too. Savannah's pretty good. We have, I think we're a majority city. And we have a pretty diverse force, but it could always be better. I think that we're not gonna be able to increase pay. We're not going to do that unless they change a lot of, unless there's fundamental economic changes. Police aren't going to get paid that much more. And so it's tough. And it's tough because you're saying, you're in a war and you're going to make $43,000 a year. Yeah, $43,000. And so, but I think we can do a better job. We might even broaden the applicant pool by saying it's not a war. Because I train new cops and I always ask, why did you join? Because they'll say, a lot of people want to kill cops, blah, blah, blah. And I say, then why did you join? And they all say, because they wanted to help. Well, we'll put that to the test. You really want to help? Do this. And make that the reason why you joined. And also just increase the encounters that people have in their normal day with police officers where they're not drama. I mean, it's insane that most people have never talked to a cop outside of 911. That's insane. And so if we do the job with a neighbor mindset, that might actually encourage more neighbors to be police. Just a thought.
Yeah. I've got a question from Mia Bloom. Do you think the fact that the other three officers were arrested, that the other three officers were arrested will impact whether other police officers continue to turn a blind eye when the bad apple engages in bad behaviors, or will the police unions clamp down on people coming forward to report bad behavior?
Yeah, so that's two separate things. Hi, Mia. And so, the officers that failed to render aid or failed to step, you have a duty to intervene. I mean, they were watching a violent felony unfold. That guy was murdering George Floyd. And I feel bad for the cops because literally it was their fourth day and he was their training officer. So that was a terrible situation. But then there's a baseline humanity. You can't let that happen. But they'll deal with that. I think that it's not like every cop sees all other dirty cops and doesn't say anything. A lot of times these people are acting in isolation. I mean, I don't see any bad cops, but also it's a self-selecting circle. I intentionally hang out with positive people and I make small units and our shift is really good. I'm not Pollyannish, I'm not naive. I know it exists, but it doesn't exist like in TV. But then you see it on, your TV. And so, police unions are a problem. I'll flat out say that. I'm pro-union in every single way. I'm not pro-police union, and I can afford to say that because I'm not in a union. This is the South. We don't like unions. But they're just designed to protect the officer. But the police officers are designed to protect their neighbors. And so they're at odds a lot of times. And they're going to have to change. And that's some of the thing driving the defund police and reform is that they just get rid of it so they can restart a contract. And the police union is going to make it easy for them because they take any criticism as an assault. I mean, the garbage that comes out of these people's mouths, the union spokesmen and stuff is insane. If I said that, I'd be fired. But also, if you said that on the street corner, you'd be arrested. And so, people need to. The officers standing there had a duty to intervene. You had to at every level, and I hate that this happened. But I think that it will make other officers aware that, hey, I'm not going to let this guy, one, ruin my career, but two, I'm not going to let him kill my neighbor. Hopefully. Yeah.
Before, I know we're coming to the end of the hour, but I wanted to share, there was an interesting comment that came through from Frank Mead. And I want to share this with you, Pat, and for your thoughts. He comes from New York City. He's in New York City, and he sits on the NYPD Citizen Advisory Board. He says, NYPD is making novel approaches to citizen police collaboration. The Community Affairs Bureau is in constant outreach. I count among my friends 2 cops who took money out of their own pockets to help a homeless man get a haircut, cleaned up, a suit, and in quick order, a job. That is what policing is about. Too many people have the idea of policing as NYPD Blue and Hill Street Blues, same as the idea that everyone thinks of the agency in the intel community as James Bond and his Ashton Martin with a beautiful woman waiting for him.
Ish.
That's from Frank. What do you think of that, Pat?
It's true. There are wonderful people in every profession. There's certainly wonderful people in cops. I just wish that our good deeds were less ad hoc, less dependent on the individual. I mean, it's great that some people are individually charitable. It's nice that I make tactical caring kits. It would be better if we had a system that, one, we're not warriors. And again, I'll go back to that because that's literally the root problem. Anything that we can encourage to make the kindness and the transparency and importantly, justice and the fairness more systemic is what we need to do. Ad hoc kindness, random kindness is great for an individual person, but it's terrible for a neighborhood.
Yeah. So Pat, in closing, and thank you everyone for your questions. We're coming to the end of our discussion, but I did want to ask, or maybe Meekat will make an appearance. I don't know. But Pat, I mean, I think we've learned a lot from you in this conversation, from the mindset, the us versus them, the community collaboration, the engagement that's necessary for change in police. But what's your call to action? What do you think? And we have many different flavors of folks on the line. NYPD, we've got DHS, we've got government, multilateral institutions, ordinary citizens. So what's your call to action following some of the events that we've seen?
I'm very uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable speaking out because because I've been very deliberate over 3 years on Twitter. I'm very intentional. I'm trying to get a certain message across. I don't focus on uses of force or arrest because those are legal issues. I also don't have many uses of forces. But I am uncomfortable like in this new role of, because I'm not an expert. I'm not. I have 3 years as a local cop. I have a lot of other experience, but 3 years. My call to action is we need to imagine the end of this war and then work towards that. But then what's after that? I cannot stress it enough. It drives everything I do. We all matter, or none of us do. And I always get choked up when I say that because it just drives everything. The work that we do, police officer is a hard job, but a lot of jobs are hard. We've deified this. It's like where we made every military person a hero. We don't have to take care of them. We don't have to take care of their families when they die. Their health care, their housing can suck as long as we have a yellow sticker and we're heroes. They're good. You can't criticize the military. And the police are the same thing. You can't criticize the police. We need to be criticized. We need to be thick-skinned. We have the power of the state. So it's okay if somebody yells at us. My call to action is that we need a neighbor mindset. We need to end this war. We need to end the warrior mindset. That's it.
Thank you so much, Pat. No, I think incredibly important in those that last piece, we all matter or none of us do. I think that there's some real truth and hope in that. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Pat, so much for sharing your experience, your expertise. You are an expert. I mean, look how quickly you move.
What's up?
We do view you as an expert. So thank you for sharing your expertise with us. I want to invite everyone on the line to please continue to join us for our webinars. We try to keep these conversations informal, open with our experts at the center, and also drawing in new expertise. Also want to invite you to follow Pat Skinner on Twitter, so you can get premium access to some of his thoughts and opinions on policing as well as his cat. So
I hear him, but I don't see him, which it worries me when I hear him and don't see him.
Well, thank you so much again, and enjoy the day, and we'll be in touch on future webinars. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.